And we are live. Hi, everyone. This is Noelle Acheson of the Crypto is Macro Now podcast. And this is the Press Publish sessions where I talk with fellow newsletter writers, not about crypto, not about macro, but about what it's like to be a newsletter writer, why we do what we do, how we do it, what issues we come across, what advice we'd give those thinking of starting out, where we think media is going. And frankly, there's no one I'd rather be talking to about especially that last point than Brady Dale, my former colleague. We were at CoinDesk together, and Brady was always, for me anyway, one of the blue blood journalists on the team. He has a long storied experience in journalism, period, and he was the one that brought gravitas and actual the journalistic ethos to a lot of what we were covering in this new industry. So, Brady, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for that kind introduction, Noelle. It was great to work with you back in the day.
It seems like yesterday. Things have changed so much, though, in the interim. And you left CoinDesk to join Axios, if I remember correctly, right?
Oh, I went to the Defiant for a little while
Oh,
first,
that's right.
and then the Axios. Yeah.
And you wrote the Axios crypto newsletter, which I was an avid reader of, but you left Axios recently to start your own writing. Can you tell us a bit about the why and how that's gone so far?
Yeah, I mean the why was a few things. I always wanted to do my own thing, and I felt like I needed to, you know, do it or never have tried to do it, and I'd always sort of regret it. Axios also just wasn't going great. Like the newsletter never really hit escape velocity. I mean, I would I would kill for the subscriber numbers that we had at Axios to, what I had now, but it wasn't great for Axios, like in their terms. And also I went to Axios because I thought going to a mainstream publication would sort of like raise my profile and stuff, but honestly, I actually think it had the opposite effect. I mean, maybe that was just the quality of what I was doing, but like I would go to crypto events and people would be like, "So what are you doing now?" And I was just like, "Oh my God." And so whereas when I was working at CoinDesk, and I would wear this, I used to wear the tie back in the day. People would like recognize me by the tie alone, So it was just like it was yeah, it just wasn't doing me any good other than the fact that they paid me well. It was a nice compensation package, but everything else was sort of going the other direction. And they were starting to make noises that like they were probably just going to wrap it up anyway. I mean, crypto was losing interest and we weren't having a great response to the newsletter. And so I was just like, well, I'd rather go on my own terms. So yeah, I left in November.
And the huge relief of just like controlling the timing yourself. I think
Yeah.
probably the shift was that crypto native media obviously is going to have a much higher presence at the crypto conferences
Hmm.
back then, and it was a very cool culture back
Hmm.
then as well. There was a buzz, everyone was in it together to create
Yeah.
a better financial system. And then you no doubt did raise your profile among the mainstream crowd, among mainstream media, those that read Axios newsletters because they're generally pretty good, but are not necessarily crypto natives. That's not
Hmm.
necessarily the audience that you care about, though.
Hmm. Yeah, it was just tricky. It was like the Axios audience also is pretty left leaning, and so like it was pretty clear when I started the newsletter. They were like they wanted a crypto newsletter. Like the audience wanted a newsletter that would sort of cover crypto the way like NPR would, and be like, this is all nonsense and it's all going to zero. Like that was, and they were frustrated from the get go that that's not what I was doing. So and I just don't know that we ever succeeded in bringing in some of the crypto people. I mean, I should note that when I started it with Crystal Kim, who was my partner for a good long while and was a great partner. And she's now at Investopedia and she's still covering crypto stuff. And yeah, so, but we just, I don't know. It's like we couldn't access the broader crypto world, and the mainstream crowd was not really uh, buying what we were selling, even though we kept being right about the things we would tell them, just like, this is probably going to happen. And then it would happen. But I don't know. That just,
Yeah, it's almost as
it,
if you knew what you were talking about.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is there any mainstream publication that you know of that does crypto well?
I mean, Bloomberg hired half the new CoinDesk newsroom back in the day. I think Muyao and David Pan are still doing good stuff, our former colleagues. So I'm glad
Mhm.
to see that they're still prospering out there. So I'm not following Bloomberg as closely as I used to because I've quit, paying to get past the paywall. And I mean, I still do it on occasion, but yeah, I think Bloomberg's okay. They're pretty good. I'd say Bloomberg's probably the best. You know, the I like David Yaffe Bellany at the New York Times, who's kind of their main crypto guy, and he does stuff that's okay, but like more broadly, the New York Times, especially in like the last few months, seems to be like willfully bad on crypto. It's like they're trying to be as bad as possible. So yeah, I don't know, there's the Wall Street Journal, I guess, is not bad too. They get some on the sort of the really businessy stuff. They do that pretty well. Well, and I guess Fortune, Fortune's not bad. I can't read their stuff because it's through a paywall, and they're a harder paywall to get around.
Yeah, and the whole paywall thing, I definitely want to get to that. But before we do that, it's worth pointing out that the attempt of mainstream media to embrace the crypto industry has been obviously fraught with struggles because crypto is complicated, as you know better than just about anyone, and it does take quite a lot of work and understanding and compassion for the ethos, for the goals of the industry to be able to
Mm,
see where this could go. And it's reminiscent of there are parallels with what's happened with all the crypto events that are now more populated by suits than
mhm,
by the actual idealists, the starry-eyed
yeah,
idealists. And this is something that you and I have probably been juggling with for a while, to hearing a lot of people that the starry-eyed idealism is gone from the industry, which is why many
mhm,
people are starting to get disillusioned. Many of us who were in it from the early
mhm,
days, anyway.
yeah,
But I want to hear. I want to hear about what you're working on now. Front Stage Exit. Please tell
yeah,
us why you chose that name and what your focus is.
yeah. So I mean, the idea of Front Stage Exit is I wanted to write primarily about crypto, but with the ability to go beyond it sometimes. I wanted to explore the thing I think I have done best as a reporter and where I'm at my strongest is dealing with frontier topics, like stuff that people can't really wrap their head around that like seems weird. I think I'm pretty comfortable with those things and I'm pretty good at kind of understanding them and sort of like explaining them to people who are curious about them. So I wanted to do crypto and then and then other frontier things. I called it Front Stage Exit because I wanted to have an ethos of the site, and so to me, the most important thing that crypto provides, and kind of one of the things I think people should keep reaching for in our increasingly, you know, digital panopticon future, is exit options. And crypto provides this really powerful way of exiting a financial system. And it's what I always say about it is it's the least used use case, but the most important. It's like you probably will never need it, but if you ever do, you'll be glad it's there. Like that's
Yeah.
that's the thing. That's the thing about exit. And so I called it Front Stage Exit because the idea was like, I was like coming right at people with it. I was exiting out into the audience. That was sort of the big idea. So yeah, so I was just trying to capture that ethos of what I think is the most important thing about this technology and some other technologies too. Is a way to opt out.
And this is something that, like, going back to what we were talking about, the starry-eyed idealism over the
Mhm,
early days. It's why I got into the industry as well. It's why I still care about it. And while I focus a lot on the macro events and geopolitics as well, for me, that is, as you say, the main use case, and the
mhm,
fragmentation of payment systems, the resistance to censorship. That's the kind
mhm.
of stuff that I care very much about. Have you found the Substack community in general to be receptive to that kind of frontier writing?
Well, they are interested in some frontier topics. I don't find much of a crypto stack. There's not much of a crypto stack. So no, I haven't found them to be particularly receptive or interested in it. There are some big crypto substacks, as you I'm sure know, but they more seem to be kind of what I refer to as the touts, like the ones who sort of like tell you that they've got an angle for you and whatever. So yeah, but they doesn't seem like there's a ton of appetite for sort of crypto news or just sort of like uh I guess reasonable, more reasonable, less promising to make you rich sort of analysis of things.
Yeah.
Like I haven't, yeah.
The understanding about why it matters, and again, this is why I do what I do, explaining why it matters. But no, that's not going to do as well as the make me rich quick. We saw
Hmm.
this back at CoinDesk. Do you remember the battles about making your titles more SEO friendly? And what would always win was when you put Bitcoin and a price in the
Hmm.
title.
Right.
And frankly, that's not what either you or I cared about. But
Hmm.
media business models are complicated. They they need the clicks for the ad revenue. Where do you see media business more generally going? I mean, you've had experience at CoinDesk, you've had experience at a smaller crypto site, and you've had experience at a big flagship name. Now you're working on your own newsletter business. So with that panopticon, basically, and with that landscape in mind, where do you see media going?
Well, I mean, news media like reporting, I honestly think is totally toast right now. I just think it's doomed. I The trouble is no one has articulated a new business model for it that works. I have a couple ideas on that which we can talk about, but obviously I'm not a business guy, though I do see a couple of things that could happen. But like as I was saying in our pre-call, I have a story that I've been trying to sell as a freelance piece for a few weeks now. It hasn't really worked out, but I'll probably just publish on my Substack soon. As you probably remember about me, I've always had a bit of a fraught relationship with the PR world. Um, and so
Yeah.
I was interested in that topic. Like I wanted to finally like look into it and sort of explore my objections to the communication industry as we know it. And so I started looking into that, and what I found was uh was a very surprising whole other thing actually. But over the course of it, the question that so what I found was that the PR industry has, if you look at the public filings of the biggest PR companies, well, the first thing I looked at was like how big are the biggest PR companies, and the biggest PR companies out there are considerably bigger. The publicly traded ones are considerably bigger than the biggest news companies, which is that's the first piece of signal.
I
Like the
did
New
not
York,
know that.
yeah, yeah, they're way bigger. Like around in the 90s, the biggest ones, like the New York Times, and the biggest PR company at the time, were about the same size. And the numbers aren't in front of me right now, but I want to say like the biggest one is like 8 times the size of the New York Times, but I'm not quite sure. I'm right. It might be like more 3 or 4, whatever. But overall, the PR companies are much larger now than the media industry, which is already like that's disturbing, right? And so like as news shrinks and these companies are growing, you have to ask like, well, if this is an industry that's sort of secondary to news, right? How is it we can be shrinking and they can be growing? Like it's not like our reach is getting bigger. So how can their value proposition be getting bigger, right? So as I dug into this, I realized, and this makes perfect sense, and you can see it in their public filings, they are shifting their attention to social media now. They're going at influencers, and so they've bought all these they've bought these channels that these companies you've never heard of. Like one of them's called Captivate. And what these things do is they have all these influencers on the platform. And if you've got some campaign you want to run, you put in the kind of demographics you're looking for and the kind of vibe you're looking for, and it'll find 10,000 influencers of all different sizes and levels, and it'll offer them the campaign and just pays them to do it. So this is where the PR industry is going. And it answered my question. I was like, how can they be growing if we're shrinking? And the answer is because they are taking on a whole other that they're going where the actual conversation has shifted to away from us. And so then I got curious about how big are we now? And that's really hard to figure out. It's just like how much attention we get. But I found a few researchers, like Pew has done some work on this, and this other independent scholar has done some work on it. And I found that if you look at the attention people spend on Americans spend online to the news, it's hard to say, but it's roughly, I think what I found was it's like they spend 3 times more time like scrolling social media than they do looking at the news, like these sort of news channels. But it's actually worse than that. It's actually way, way worse than that, because then if you dig into the numbers, what you find is like most of the time that Americans spend looking at the news is times watching TV news, which is only older Americans. It's like Gen X and up. And so, like, obviously, they're not making more of them. And so, like, the rest of the news consuming audience is consuming like 8 minutes of news per day versus like an hour and a half of social scrolling. So, like, once I saw that, and it's 8 minutes a day and shrinking, right? It's like in the most recent Pew poll on this, it said that like 40% of the people they talked to were trying to consume less news. Like, and so, and it's like
Well,
they're already
un
not going to.
unders understandable given how bleak things can get, but
No, it's
on the other
true.
hand, what do you think they generally mean by news anyway?
Yeah, I think they mean like actual news channels, right? So it's like you're looking at Axios or looking at the New York Times or watching TV or listening to news radio, like that kind of thing. And of course, it's super hard to track. It's hard to know. So these are just estimates, but I don't know. Like once I looked at it, I was just like, sounds truthy, like it seems sort of accurate.
And so where's the extension of this? Where do you think the news industry is gonna end up, and it does AI feature in there?
Yeah, I don't. I think when you look at it more and more, like people's shifting attention to social media influencers and like what we saw at CoinDesk, right? Like what increasingly the public wants now that there's tons of options out there. In the old days of the news, they had this captive audience thing. And so you had this luxury. And the truth is, like newspapers, the business of newspapers wasn't actually getting people the news. The business of newspapers was distributing grocery ads, right? And like we were just sort of the wrapping on grocery ads. We thought we were a much greater thing than that, but it turns out we were really just wrapping on grocery ads. But because they had that monopoly, they had that luxury of sort of offering this higher end products. But now that there is an infinite array of product of things that people consume, people want things that sort of confirm the world that they want to see, and like, they want to see things that say Bitcoin's price is going up, and they want to see people telling them that they can be hotter, stronger, and faster and live forever. And like that's what the social media world provides. And I just it doesn't seem like sort of the truth telling journalism business competes with that very well. Uh, the On the flip side, I mean, we were said we were going to talk about things that Substack could do and other platforms. The thing that does seem to me like a potential business model for news, if any of the platforms wanted to do this, is I mean, I actually think the platform should start newsrooms. That to me would make sense, particularly Substack. So like because the thing is, Substack is basically a gigantic op-ed page, right? I mean, that's what people come to Substack for, is they want to read opinions. And so Substack depends on there being a news industry for people to have opinions about. To me, it would be obvious if Substack opened a newsroom and focused it on the places it knows it has lots of people, like whatever its local desks or the place it has the most subscribers and also does national and global stuff. And before folks are like, oh, that'd be terrible. We don't want to compete with Substack Central. No, no, no. The smart way for Substack to do it is they open a newsroom and it's paywalled, but it's paywalled to if you subscribe to any other Substacks. If you're paying for anything on Substack, an additional benefit is you get access to Substack news. Like to me, that makes sense. And I think X could do something very similar. Like X depends on the news as well. And so like that is a way in which like the business of news actually does align with a business model that's working, and that's the platform business model. But I can understand why people would be skeptical about it. I mean, there's all these things like it's like, well, who covers the awfulness of the platforms? And it's like, well, I guess the other platform. I don't know, but like, um, like trust the
The
ex
readers.
journalist to tell you when
The
Substack
readers.
is bad. Yeah, but it's just like it's just the core. I mean, a thing that another story I was really trying to write, but I think everything anyone doesn't like about the journalism industry right now comes back to this core issue of there being no business model.
Mm.
Like even for example, not to go off into super hard, I'll wrap up here, but I can tell you having worked in a mainstream media organization, there people in the mainstream media are definitely strongly to the left, right? Like super like whatever you think their coverage looks like, they're way further left than that, in privately. But I actually think that's rational in a world of a dying media industry. I think what really is driving that is less like genuinely being that extremely to the left and more is in an industry that's shrinking. the most likely thing to keep you afloat is other journalists. So if you lose your job and you're friends with lots of journalists, other journalists will help you find your next job. So if you are signaling clearly like we are on a team together, we are collectively on this team, then you are more likely to be supported if you run into trouble, right? And that's why I think there has been such a hard shift to the left. There's such a political inclination for the whole industry because everyone needs to know that everyone is on the same team. And so that to me is what's really driving it. And that fundamentally comes that it wouldn't be that severe if the industry had a business model that was strong and people could feel secure that like, well, if I lose this job, there'll be other jobs out there for me. That's not the vibe anymore. And so you need to we effectively have this gigantic union of journalists, this unofficial union of journalists that's called Blue Sky, and that's what's driving that leftward slant in my view. And every other problem you want to name with journalism just comes back to this that there is just not a business model and no one's come up with one.
Platforms, how would that translate into something like Substack? If I understand correctly, it would be something akin to the opinion columns essentially supporting news, whereas previously it would be the other way around.
Hmm.
CoinDesk, we had the journalism that was actually supporting the events were supporting the journalism. Journalism was simply
Hmm.
the wrapper for that. So
Yeah.
it comes down to the demand for actual journalism. And
Hmm.
Substack presented itself in the early days as the alternative, where you can be a journalist on Substack and you're not necessarily going to have to conform with the political bias of your flagship. And you can reach an audience directly, and the loyalty will eventually come through to the dollars. What's your experience been on Substack so far, setting up your own operation?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's not been great. I mean, like, I guess is the best way to put it. I joined Substack because we were talking beforehand about the sort of the notes thing. I found notes encouraging as an outsider looking in. I've been a user of Substack for a long time. My Brady Dell account is not very old because I mean, I still have this anonymous account that I use Substack under because I didn't want people to know what I was subscribing to. So I've been on it from the early days. I watched notes come along. To me, I believed that Substack was the site that was about growth. So I understood it was limited in terms of monetization options, but I thought what made sense was to be on a thing that was going to be working to help me discover new readers. And that's what I thought sort of like notes and all that pointed to. Um, I think that was once true for Substack, but it hasn't been true for a while, unfortunately for me. And so, yeah, to me, now that I am more heavily invested in it, what I think Substack is designed for today, and this makes sense, it's just tough for people who aren't that big, is Substack is designed to drive subscriptions, paid subscriptions. That's Substack's priority. And it will drive those paid subscriptions wherever it's most likely to get paid subscriptions. And where it's most likely to get paid subscriptions is to newsletters that already have lots of paid subscriptions. And what brought this home for me is I read this uh what's his Nate Silver's How Popular is Elon Musk uh post one day. I put a like on it. And every single day that post was showing up in my feed every day. And I'm like, I've already liked it. You guys know I've seen it. Like why are you showing this to me again? It's because I'm not a subscriber to I'm not a paid subscriber to Nate Silver. And it thinks if, oh, you liked this post, if we keep showing it to you, you might get prompted to become a paid subscriber. And that signal to me, it's like, oh, Nate Silver is great at getting more paid subscribers. What Substack fundamentally wants is paid subscribers. Understandably, they make money off of that. And so what the growth drivers that they're building are really for are rewarding the people who are already doing well, which like I understand the theory of that, but it is I think that shift, which I think happened recently, is why a lot of other people, even ones who are doing kind of okay, are now complaining that like growth is just not really working for them on there. And I'll say for me, like I have gotten no growth from Substack. If you like look at sort of even Substack's own numbers, the crazy thing is, I checked this recently. I've gotten more subscribers from Twitter, which is a site that is known for hating links, than I've gotten from Substack. And I've put a lot of time into like, participating in the whole like restacking lots of other people's stuff, putting lots of notes up, all the things that are theoretically meant to like drive. It just hasn't really worked. Most of my subscribers I've gotten from just emailing a jillion people who I met over the years. So I got a certain number that way. And then I got some from Twitter, a few from LinkedIn, and like next to none from Substack, and I think the reason is because Substack wants to drive attention to the people who are already getting a lot of attention. So
That's extraordinary because it's exactly what happened on X and is one of the reasons why many came over to Substack from X to get away from the control of the algorithm. But the algorithm is an inevitable part of any kind of platform. There isn't really an
yeah,
alternative at the
yeah.
moment. And in the end, Substack is, after all, a business and needs to think about, driving the profitability. But would there be a solution to that? Can you think of anything?
I really I can't. I mean, the thing I would say for folks thinking about going independent is, I guess looking back on it, I wish I would have thought a little bit more about trying Beehive. Like the big difference with Beehive and Substack, I now understand, having looked into it some more, is Substack has this whole purity thing, whereas Beehive, their core idea is, if there is a possible way for you to make money off of a newsletter, we're going to build it. You can opt to use it or not, but like we're about every, I'm speaking from Beehive's, but Beehive is about every possible mechanism for making money in the world. Substack has resisted offering an ads feature, for example. Beehive built it as soon as they possibly could. It's just like, and I have mixed feelings about that kind of thing, but it's like nice to have the option. So I joined Substack because I thought it was the one that delivered growth. It really hasn't delivered growth. I don't know if I would have done any better on Beehive, but I might have made a few bucks off of it, off of if I would have done the ads thing. But it's just that it's just a thing for people to think about. Is just like, what do you think like, if you were, so say for example, uh you've got a partnership on your on your newsletter, which I'd be interested in hear how you got that. But if, like, for example, if you were someone who were pretty sure that you had a few companies who might want to sponsor something you're doing, well, you might want to think about launching on Beehive, because Beehive is gonna bend over backwards to make that work, whereas that is not really Substack's priority. So it's just that's a thing I wish I would have thought through a little bit more before opting into the Substack world.
That is interesting because at the time also, I mean, when I joined Substack, it was like the cool place to hang out, much more
Hmm.
so than Beehive, and I really liked their interface, and setting up is not complicated, and I love that they handle all of the finances. That's
Hmm.
pretty seamless. I have struggled with
Yeah.
Substack Live, I will give you that, but I read the other day, and I don't know if this is true, that Beehive was potentially going to be acquired by LinkedIn. What's
Oh,
your take on acquisition of platforms by other platforms?
yeah. I don't know. I guess it's just inevitable.
You know,
Uh,
it it could help circulation if you got something like LinkedIn promoting you, but again, that might also inform the culture of
yeah.
Beehive, would make it not quite the cool place to be.
Yeah, the thing that made me reluctant about Beehive is, it seems like, since they don't have a notes or an app or whatever, I was just like, it's just entirely up to you for discovery, right? Like, it's just like, if you got a Beehive newsletter, for now, you're just a straight newsletter. There's no like platform. And as skeptical as I am of social media, I don't know, the platform seemed like a way to like find new folks. And so that was compelling to me. But yeah.
What's your take on the possibility that I've heard floated about Substack offering bundled subscriptions?
Oh man, I didn't know that they've been taught. That is the thing that I think Substack should do, like, by far. Well, the thing, I mean, I don't know how, once upon a time I reported a lot on the Amazon Kindle world, and there is so much misinformation about that whole world out there. I think 'cause it just makes a lot of writers very antsy, but at least back when I was reporting on it, which was a long time ago, there were these like, romance writers and sci-fi writers, very pulpy genre folks, who are making more money than every author that you've ever heard of. Like, any of them on the New York Times bestseller list, they were making chump change compared to these guys. There's so much more. They're making so much more money. And it was crazy. And the heart of how they made so much money, the big driver, is sort of the Netflix of Kindle. So like the hardcore readers, they pay like $10 a month, and they get access to all these books. What do they call it? The Kindle Unlimited program. And that is the thing that makes crazy money for the people who like develop an audience. And to me, it just seems obvious that Substack should do something similar. Like Nate Silver, he's got his great base of people. He doesn't need to join it. But if like you created a Substack Unlimited for all the like for people who wanted to opt into it, people could get past the paywalls for everyone in it if they paid what $11 a month or whatever it is, and then you just get paid pro rata based on how much attention you drive. That's just such like that would be such a good deal for so many people. Substack is way too expensive, right? Like it's so hard to justify the fact that I pay as much for like I keep talking about Nate Silver, he's on my mind, but like as Nate Silver as I would to subscribe to the Washington Post weekly. It's just like it's it's no comparison.
Yeah.
And so
One guy
you start
versus a team. Yeah.
yeah, you start subscribing to a few people on Substack, you can very quickly get to 50, $60 a month,
More.
a-
Yeah. More.
and yeah, and like that just doesn't that clearly just does not work at scale. So you could scale it out. So yeah, so bundles would be good. Like people could come together and offer packages. But what I think would really make sense for Substack. So my two big ideas for Substacks are Substack News and Substack Unlimited. If they made a Substack Unlimited program, people could opt into, and you just get paid pro rata based on the attention you drive. To me, those are the two obvious things that the company can do. I expect the problem with the unlimited thing is a bunch of their biggest guns on the platform would freak out because they'd think it would undercut them. From what I like, for example, this really famous author on the Amazon Kindle program, this guy, Hugh Howey, they've made TV shows of his books now. What he told me when I talked to him years ago was concerns like that are ridiculous. Like he was delighted to be in the Amazon Kindle Unlimited program. That made him so much more money than direct sales. He thought it was great. So I don't know. I think it would be I understand the fear, but I actually think it would work out really well for everyone. I think probably the big guns would end up wanting to join the unlimited program because it would do so well. So I think Substack shouldn't just do packages. It should do one giant package.
And in the end, it comes down to why you're on Substack in the first place. Some people are there to make a lot of money. Other people are there to just talk to their community, to have an audience to whom to write, say whatever they think, and meet like-minded people as well. I've made some friends on Substack, people who are focusing on similar areas and we have similar outlooks, etc. And that's not about the money for me. That's about
Hmm.
and I fret about my growth as well. I'm growing fine on the free subscribers, not growing at all. In fact, declining on the paid subscribers. And
Hmm.
I used to fret about this, but then I suddenly realized that I love doing what I do anyway. I never was in it for the money. I would love to earn more, but I'm lucky to be able to do it. And I'm extremely lucky to have the sponsors that I have. You asked how I got that. It's sheer luck, actually. I just published in the newsletter one day, anyone interested in sponsoring, let me know. And Allium, who are a data provider, they responded and they're great people to work with. I've been extraordinarily lucky there, touch wood. So I think, that's also a thing. Have you thought about doing video?
I haven't. Well, I mean, I'd be open to it. I do this podcast, but that's not really conducive to liveness. I've thought about it. I just don't feel like I feel like video makes sense once you have an audience that's kind of responding to you on a certain level. Like that's a thing they want. And I just don't. My readers, I don't hear from them. So it's just like I just have a feeling I'd go on and it would just be just sort of be me holding forth. So I haven't done it yet. Yeah, that's why I would do it if I thought it was if I thought there was EV in it, to use EA terms.
Yeah. Well, you'd be good at it for sure. And I'd certainly tune in, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be worth your time, especially with so much else going on. Isn't everyone? Hello. Thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate it. If anyone has any questions for Brady as we start to wrap up, do drop them in. And again, this is not about crypto. This is about newsletters and where we think media is going. So feel free to ask Brady anything about his experience or any advice he would give, etc. Now, Brady, if you could wave a magic wand and change something about the way Substack interface works. Okay, we talked about the bundling, and I think that's a brilliant idea, especially for the community. We've also talked about the newsroom. If you could change something about the interface, is there anything that comes to mind?
No, I mean I'm pretty okay with the interface. There's probably some headache I have, but I've worked on so many CMSs at this point that like I don't know, it's just like none of them are magic.
None of them are perfect.
Yeah, so it's just like I don't know, it's all yeah, it's all right. And it has to do this complicated thing of both delivering for the site and delivering for the public. Oh, I know one thing actually that is pretty crazy about it is, have you noticed that like Substack lets you have your own URL, which is cool. But if you click on anyone else's URL link, it like you sort of get logged. You don't get logged out, but you have to like take an action to be like, logged for it to know that you're logged in, So like I'll open somebody who I'm a paid subscriber of, and I'll like want to leave a comment or restack something, and it'll be like only subscribers can restack or leave a comment. And I'm like, well, I'm a subscriber, and then it's like, oh, yeah, okay, got to hit the thing and, and like re up it, and it'll know that I'm logged in. So that's weird, but I don't know, whatever, not too big of a deal.
Now, at least with the platform as big as Substack, we know that they have an entire team working on this kind of stuff. Whereas often, especially if the in-house platforms, there's not necessarily the resources that you
Hmm.
would hope. So I've heard some nightmare stories about in-house CMS, and the one
Hmm.
we had at CoinDesk wasn't terrible, but it had plenty of issues. And you and I fortunately left before the big upgrade, didn't we? Which
Yeah,
apparently was a
yeah.
total disaster. Now, as we start to wrap up, I know we talked about AI very briefly. I'd like to come back to that. Do you
Mhm.
think we know that AI is obviously impacting news more broadly? I confess that I have played around with some AI feeds to just tell
Mhm.
me what's going on in the various media sources around the world because we only get the Western news. I'm very interested in some of the more local news. But when it comes to a platform like Substack, an argument could be made that independent voices are the antidote to the AI feeds that are no
Mhm.
doubt going to become the main part of the news diet going forward. Do you see AI influencing the demand for the independent voices of Substack? Do you see them enhancing it somehow?
I mean, a lot of people talk about wanting independent voices, but I don't, you'll also hear these stories. I never seem to come across them, but people are always surfacing these enormous Substacks with like 50,000 subscribers that are just clearly all AI generated. I mean, I suspect maybe all the subscribers are fake. I don't really know, but um, yeah, people talk about a lot about demanding it. I haven't I don't think I suspect even as everyone is complaining about all the slop out there that subscriptions to independent writers, haven't particularly changed. It's a lot of complaint without, people voting with their dollars too much, but maybe they're doing it for someone, other outlets, but I suspect that they aren't.
It's especially striking to me that you mentioned you got more subscribers from links on X than you do from your engagement on notes and things on Substack
Yeah,
itself. And X is notorious for having just a flood of AI slop. So
yeah.
I guess the
I
takeaway is we just don't know where this is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, the subscribers I'm talking about are a pittance. It is not a notable number. It is more than notes. Yeah, like I don't think I've ever gotten any from notes. Like I haven't ever had like no note that I've ever written has been particularly popular of my own thing, but I've engaged with a bunch of people, and have had a lot of reaction to engagement that I've written to people. Like, I mean, particularly I comment on Freddie DeBoer's stuff all the time. And I've had some of those like really blow up, but that hasn't, like getting lots and lots and lots of likes, off of them. But none of that seems to drive people coming over to see like what I'm about. They'll just be like, oh yeah, I agree with that guy and just move on. So, um, yeah, it doesn't seem like notes are they don't do anything until you get bigger. I mean, the core thing of Substack is just it seems like Substack, the people it works best for are the people who rug pull mainstream media. Like you work for a mainstream media publication, you get pretty well known from that, and at a certain point, you're just like, peace. I'm gonna take the money and run. And that seems to be the best approach. Obviously, I worked for a mainstream publication, but I didn't ever get like super big out of it. I actually feel like I kind of shrank. But for folks who that does work for, that seems to be the best path, and then a few other people get lucky beyond that. But yeah, it's a tough road, there on Substack.
Yeah, but you do have a great reputation in the crypto industry. You've always been known as an independent voice, and you've always had a very strong writing style that would lend itself to the longer form pieces that you're starting to do now. So I'm a big fan of your newsletter, and I would encourage anyone watching to sign up, give it a try. Brady is an excellent writer and just brings an original take to stuff that actually really matters. He's not going to focus on the stuff that we don't like about the crypto industry. He's focusing on why it matters and some of the biggest stories about media that are being overlooked. So, Brady, thank you so much for
Thanks for
being here
having me.
today. Thank you,
Sorry I was
everyone
bleak.
who's joined us. Well, I think the times call for it. Your comparison between ex-Substack, your comparison between mainstream and independent media has definitely been, I would say, refreshing. Bleak, perhaps, but refreshing, and we need that kind of honesty, which is what you've always brought to your work. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone. This will be uploaded onto Substack as soon as I hit the off button, I think. I'm still getting the hang of this. And feel free to reach out to Brady if you have any questions that go deeper than what we've been able to talk about here today. Thanks, everyone.